I'm going to talk about a rather nerdy topic, right? And the aim of this speech tonight is to basically make you feel about as passionate about these things as I do. I'm going to talk about teeth, and many paleontologists, I'm studying paleontology by the way, study teeth probably more than you would expect, because teeth can tell us a lot about an animal's diet, which in turn can tell us a lot about how they lived. And I'm going to talk about dinosaurs because, yeah, that's my big passion, I guess, among all the animals. And I want to talk about herbivores because I find that carnivores, you know, the big meat-eating ones, kind of boring in terms of teeth because they just have two different types of something. One of them will kind of have more conical to crush bone, and the others are more kind of leaf-like, just cut and make massive flesh damage. It's not really not that much diversity. So that's why I'm thinking herbivores, because they're so much more interesting. And the other reason is that being a herbivore is a lot tougher than being a carnivore, because plants are so much harder to digest. Because they consist of cellulose, which is a kind of a hard carbohydrate that you need a really specific enzyme to, you know, break down. And also they're not really that nutritious. Now, don't get me wrong, plants, fruits, vegetables and all that is really, really nutritious, but that's because they're meant to be eaten. I'm sure you know that the plants want you to eat them. You then go somewhere else and poop out the seeds and then a new plant grows far away. That's how they reproduce. So they want to attract the animals by putting a lot of nutrition, lots of sugars and water in them to be juicy and nice and tasty. But they don't want you to eat their leaves, their stems, their roots, because they need those to survive. And another very important point that I come back to later is that there were no fruit or vegetables or anything around for the first half of the time the dinosaurs existed. So they had to do with the other kind of stuff. And another point people usually miss is that most dinosaurs actually were herbivores. When you heard of dinosaurs, you think about the T-Rex and the Velociraptors and all those really big ones. But most of them were plant eaters. Maybe not necessarily peaceful, they were probably really scary, but they ate plants. And what's more than that, they were the dominant herbivores, the most successful and most abundant herbivores for 150 million years, which I think is pretty awesome. And during that time, they became incredibly diverse in many aspects. Size, I mean, so the smallest were probably about the size of a dog, the biggest were 100 tons plus. They had loads of different types of defenses, tail whips, tail spikes, tail clubs, shoulder spikes, arm plates, you name it, they had it. And loads of different types of social behaviors as well. They would, you know, live in herds or be solitary animals. They could take care of their young, some maybe didn't, just left them over there and fend for themselves. And of course, teeth. We're very diverse in the type of teeth. Now, we don't really have time to go through all of them because that would take a whole session literally. So we're going to focus on the three most successful and I personally think most interesting groups. First are the sauropods, the typical long-necked, really, really big ones with, you know, really long necks. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Brachiosaurus and all those. And we're going to compare those with the hadrosaurids and the ceratopsids. Now, the hadrosaurids are kind of characterized by having nothing really special except their teeth, which I find makes up for their lack of otherwise interesting features. And the ceratopsids are characterized by their facial horns and then bony neck shield, like Triceratops. I'm sure you're familiar with those as well. So the sauropods, first of all, they then had really big bodies and very tiny heads. And the challenge for them was to get in enough food to feed and sustain their whole big bodies through their tiny mouths. And the way they figured they'd do that was by basically skipping the chewing part. So they kind of evolved their teeth into something like a needle, and they didn't really have a very tightly packed at all, so they were not very good for chewing anything. Instead, they were very good for raking plant material into their mouth, you know, like a rake when you're raking the bone. You kind of did that with trees. It worked pretty well. Another thing is they had an akinetic skull, which is a scientific way of saying that their lower jaw could only move up and down, not from side to side. And you know, true chewing is moving, you know, like that. I'm exaggerating a bit, okay? So they couldn't do true chewing, they could just, I don't know, bite up. So what they would do then, as I said, they would just rake leaves or buds or whatever from the branches or from bushes. And there are pros and cons with this. The biggest con, I guess, is that you had to do all the digestive work in your stomach because you didn't do anything up in your mouth. Now, the sauropods had really big bellies, so they probably had really long intestines and all that, so it probably wasn't a problem for them, they could handle it. Instead, what the advantage was that they could get in a lot of food in quickly because they didn't waste time chewing it. They just ate and ate and ate and ate and swallowed quickly as soon as they got into the mouth. And I mean, they were the dominant herbivores for 75 million years, so that must have worked pretty well. What's more different from all other dinosaur herbivores, basically, is that they didn't have any beak, any toothless beaks in front of their mouth. Instead, they did kind of the complete opposite. They put all their teeth in front and just dropped the cheek teeth because they didn't use them for chewing, which made them even more effective at raking, because that was the part they stuck into the bush and just pulled it out. And another thing is that, I don't know if you can see it very well, but the snout is quite broad, which suggests that they are generalist herbivores, which basically means that they just put their mouth in there and pulled it back, and whatever came in, came in. They didn't really pick and choose. Skipping that. And again, I'm going to emphasize, first, during the time these were the dominant ones, there was no vegetables, no fruit or anything, so no easily available, highly nutritious food there. So they had to do with the kind of crappy food. And still, they managed to grow so big, so many, and so successfully for so long. I think that whatever they did, they must have done it very well and very right. I think they deserve a round of applause for that. So on to the next one, the hadrosaurids. They were basically complete opposites of the sauropods. They were highly adapted for chewing, and the most impressive adaptation they had was a dental battery, which basically is, I think it was 6 or 7 rows of teeth. You know, sharks have different, like 7 rows. They had 6 or 7 of those tightly packed together to make basically a solid platform for grinding plant material. And they also had lots of teeth coming from underneath, so they basically had 6 or 7 layers of teeth, all of them coming up as they were chewing, because when you chew stuff, they kind of grind away your teeth, especially plants that are kind of full of gravel and whatever. So they needed new teeth growing out all the time. And what's even more impressive is that they were enameled on one side only. You know, enamel is the hard outer casing of our teeth. So they only had that on one side, and on different opposite sides, on the upper and the lower jaw, which basically meant that when they were coming together, the enamel side of the lower jaw, for instance, would grind against the unenameled, the softer part of the upper jaw. I try to illustrate this with this picture. The purple one is the enamel side. When they come together, they would basically self-sharpen themselves. Does that make sense? Right. And so they would always be sharp, and what's even more important is that they would always fit perfectly well together. So they were self-maintaining. They didn't need to brush their teeth. They just, kept themselves healthy as they went, which I think is pretty genius. They also had what the scientists call a pleurokinetic skull, which basically means they could move the lower jaw up and down and from side to side, so they could do true chewing. And they did a lot of it, simply because that's what they were good at. So as opposed to the sauropods, they made sure they would make the most out of the food they got. They didn't get as much in, but they got every single nutrient probably out of it. It's just different ways of doing it, and it worked for them. They had a beak, a toothless beak, as opposed to sauropods. Nothing special about it really. But what they did have was cheeks. Basically, the tooth battery they had was kind of indented away from the edge of the mouth, which made space where they could put food. And with fleshy cheeks, they could probably even gobble it around and chew the food probably 3 or 4 times before swallowing it, really making most of it. I don't know if you can see very well, it's really but trust me, over there. And what's more, the broad snout, very broad snout, tells us that they were probably generous browsers, just like the sauropods, which ironically is like the only thing they had in common. Next up are the ceratopsids, and they also had this tooth battery. but slightly different design. I think they had fewer tooth rows, and they were, in return they were a bit more robust. But the main important difference was that their teeth came together at a near vertical angle, as opposed to the Hadrosaurs where they came together horizontally. So basically, I'm just going to show you what I mean. The Hadrosaurs, the first ones, would basically kind of grind the teeth like that. But these ones would come together a bit more like this instead. Like that. And also, that coupled with the fact that they had an akinetic skull, they couldn't move their jaws from side to side, just up and down, meant that they were more designed to cut and share the plant material, like scissors. And apparently someone suggested to some people that maybe they would use the same mechanism to cut and share flesh, so they would be part carnivores or something. I don't know, I've never heard of it until I saw this picture a few days ago, but someone must have put the idea forward, otherwise someone would have drawn that. I don't know about that. Yeah, could be. I'm not gonna judge. They had a beak, just like Hadrosaurids, but they were slightly different, a bit more evolved. More to that about that later. They had cheeks, just like Hadrosaurids, same mechanism. They indent their tooth rows to make space. But the beak was quite a lot narrower and more pointy, which basically means that they probably cherry-picked their food. So they took the best parts, the fruits, the fresh buds, or just the softer leaves. So they really took the best food and made sure they got the most out of it, really maximizing everything, maximizing quality. And yeah, so the Ceratopsians and the Hadrosaurs together dominated the herbivores for the remaining 75 million years after the Hadrosaurids. After the sauropod, sorry. And yeah, that basically it was exactly the time when the fruits and vegetables started coming up. And I guess kind of the message I'm trying to give here is that there's no right or wrong whether you want to be a generalist or a specialist, or whether you want to get a lot of food in quickly, or just focus on quality rather than quantity. Different things work in different times. And whatever the dinosaurs did it extremely well. They were around for 150 million years. No one has been able to do that since or before that. They were just awesome. Thank you.
You are taking questions?
Yeah, of course.
I had the sauropods used to kind of swallow like big stones and rocks.
Yeah.
Stomach to help them digest. Can you comment on that? Is that true?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's true. I mean, I've heard that for a lot of dinosaurs did that, and lots of other animals does that. It's quite a common thing. And that's a very easy way of telling someone if an animal is a herbivore or not, because carnivores don't need that. So that's one extra way of telling, yes, this guy probably ate plants because they had that. So yeah.
How would the stones kind of like navigate through the intestines? How would they kind of stay in the stomach? Do you know?
I guess the stomachs were designed so that when they swallow the stones, they wouldn't be like big enormous boulders, more like kind of pebble size, I guess.
Would they do the shells of the eggs?
Sorry?
Because it's something that chickens do in the pit dust, isn't it, to help create the shell when they lay eggs?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, that's it.
Yeah. Sorry. Basically, I guess they would just make sure that the rocks go directly into the stomach and nowhere else. And then the stomach would be kind of like a muscle thing, just kind of massaging the rocks and running them out.
Well, they say that the whole life.
Probably, yeah. Maybe they put them out and got bigger ones as they grew, I guess.
So, was the long neck characteristic of the sauropods, anyway? Because I'm just in my head, like one of my favourite dinosaurs is the Albinosaurus, because he was a massive herbivore, but I'm trying to figure out if he was a sauropod. Or, it's the really big one.
Albertosaurus.
Albertosaurus, that's a T-Rex dinosaur.
No, the one I'm thinking of is he.
You're thinking of a Apatosaurus.
Okay, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
But basically, my question is, are the long necks characteristic of the sauropods, or is it also
yes.
that hydrosaurs?
The carnivores kind of had a relatively long neck, but it wasn't even close to as long as the sauropods.
I mean, in comparison to these two.
Oh, yeah, that was the long necks.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Good question back there.
Given that these dinosaurs were really big and they were only eating quite not very nutritional food, how many hours a day were they eating?
Sorry, how many?
How many hours a day were they eating for?
Oh, probably all the time. No, I'm serious. They probably did that because I don't think they didn't have that big brains. Probably didn't have much demands of entertainment. So eating, and especially sauropods because they need to grow big quick because when they're kind of half size, it would just be months for the carnivores. So they need to eat all the time, probably. Yeah, it's a good question.
I have one more
Can
question.
you take any other characteristics from a dinosaur's teeth rather than just its diet?
Sorry?
Can you get any other characteristics of a dinosaur from its teeth rather than just its diet?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how this works, but there are some kind of ratios and stuff typical for the body, which basically means that if the tooth is this long, then the animal skull is probably this big, and then from that you can probably calculate more or less the size of the animal. I don't know how that works, but it's just like guesswork. And that's how we can find 3 bones that you have the whole animal constructed. Which is, it's kind of magic, but yeah.
I know we do have time for more questions. James.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm very interested. I'm a dentist, so I'd be interested to
Oh,
I don't know if you know this, but do you know the mechanism how they manage to regenerate their teeth? No, I don't know.
Oh, well, dinosaurs typically, they grew new teeth all the time. All dinosaurs.
Is it known how it's done?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually thought of it. I just accepted that they do it.
That's very okay, so,
Yeah, I guess they just come new all the time.
like lizards or something.
Yeah, I think I know I've read that the reason the carnivores did that at least was because they would just wanted to like bite the animal, just kind of like that, and then if the animal kind of, if this is a big animal struggling, they would be happy to lose their teeth and then easily grow out new ones than having focused everything on having one set of teeth, and then when the animal kind of breaks loose, the teeth just break off and shit, and they can't, You see what I mean? Maybe that answers your question.
I love how you directly quoted the dinosaur there when he was like that shit.
Nick.
So you mentioned herbivores had a wide variety of defences, right? If there's anything you can imagine it would have it. Was there a dinosaur with a Gatling gun at its back? like a walking tank kind of thing,
Whoa.
I've seen something similar on Google Images, but I just don't think there was a serious thing.
Don't on paint.
Right, okay.
Photo of the dinosaur.
Okay. I'll bear that in mind. Dinosaurs, no Gatling guns.
I'm sorry.
Anyone else have any serious questions?
So obviously birds evolved from dinosaurs. Why do you think that they sort of gave up on teeth and adapted to beak?
Well, I mean, probably because you can do well without the just like straight out flying, yeah. Because you can eat stuff without teeth. You just have a beak, and the beak is probably lighter than the teeth. Makes sense? Especially if you have new teeth coming out all the time, it's like a kind of expensive thing.
I would have thought it's because when you mentioned the development of fruit, birds eat berries and things, so they don't need to be like waking them up, they just pick the berries.
Yeah, could be too.
And then they get wounds as well, because they use their beaks pointy, so they should get no wounds.
That's a really good point, because all the dinosaurs, the theropods that we think might be herbivores have just lost their teeth. The dinosaurs, now they have the teeth, no, like that. The ornithomimids, the oviraptorids, they have toothless beaks as well. So they could be really wonderful.
Flight was one of the main considerations, though. Because
Yeah.
if you take a bird and then a mammal of the same size, the mammal would be infinitely heavier.
Yeah. I mean, the Dinosaurs, they did have teeth, but they weren't really adapted for a herbivore diet. So I think it's just easy to drop the teeth if you're becoming a herbivore than trying to readapt them to the plants.
Dinosaurs were cold-blooded, right?
Oh, big debates.
Oh,
I'm really into that, yeah.
Because the birds warm-blooded, they call them.
Birds are warm-blooded. That's one of the reasons we suspected some dinosaurs must have been warm-blooded at some point. There's so much evidence for and against that you don't really know what. And personally, I believe that some dinosaurs probably were. some dinosaurs probably weren't. There's nothing universal across the whole dinosaur group, just some probably were warm-blooded, others might have been like just in between, kind of, does that make sense? Some
Because
might
like
have
that, crocodiles and alligators and
Exactly.
others, they're cold-blooded, but they were around during the,
Oh, yeah,
savage
yeah.
dinosaurs and
I mean,
stuff like that.
the closest relatives of dinosaurs today are crocodiles and birds. So if one of them are cold-blooded, the other ones are warm-blooded, then it's kind of, makes sense, yeah.
And so the feathers, is there any reason for the feathers? Is that
Yeah, the feathers are a very good hint that they were warm-blooded because feathers are there to conserve heat, to keep heat inside your body. And the thing about warm-bloods is that they produce heat from inside, but the cold-bloods kind of get the heat from the sun. So if you have feathers that kind of block heat, it doesn't make sense if you are a cold-blood and rely on heat from outside to block out that. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So if they have feathers, except flight feathers, they're the sign of
Yes, so
something
some
else.
dinosaurs have feathers in them as well. True.
Yeah, they find lots of them.
That makes sense. Okay.
So that's a very good suggestion.
Okay, we're going to move on to feedback and evaluation now.
We just have one more round of applause for Sebastian.